Sometimes we get so caught up in the idea of what we think God wants to hear that we never actually let him hear us. We come dressed in this spiritual armor that looks holy, sounds holy, feels polished enough for church people to nod their heads and say, amen. But deep down, it's not the truth. It's a script. We think if we sound like we've got it all together, God will love us more, approve of us faster, or show up sooner. But here's the thing. God can't bless the person you pretend to be. He's not in love with your performance. He's in love with you. The messy, undone, complicated, not always sure you even believe you part of you. That's the person he's been waiting to hear from. I remember seasons where I would go to pray and it was almost like I was giving a report, not having a conversation. Thank you for this. Forgive me for that. Please help me with this. It was neat. It was clean and it was empty. I was doing all the right motions, but I was holding back the truth. The truth was I was hurting. The truth was I was mad. The truth was I didn't understand why certain things happened. And I was scared that if I told God exactly how I felt, maybe he would be disappointed in me. So I stayed quiet about the real stuff and only gave him the safe prayers. But can I tell you something? That's not where the breakthrough is. That's not where you find the shift that changes everything. The breakthrough happens when you throw off the mask and say, God, here's exactly where I'm at. I'm tired. I'm frustrated. I'm lonely. I'm angry. I don't know how to fix this. And I don't even know if I have the strength to try again. You have to stop thinking of prayer as a performance and start thinking of it as a lifeline. This is not your audition for holiness. This is you calling your Father and saying, I need you now more than ever. See, God's not impressed with the version of you that's pretending to be okay. He's attracted to the version that's willing to be real. Because when you bring him your reality, you're telling him, I trust you enough to handle me at my worst. And that's the kind of trust that heaven responds to. That's when the walls start falling and the healing starts flowing, not because you said the right thing, but because you said the real thing. Sometimes we think faith means pretending we're not struggling, but real faith is telling God about the struggle while still believing he's able to change it. You can come to him with tears in your eyes, a lump in your throat, and questions you don't even have the courage to ask out loud. And he'll still lean in. He doesn't pull back because you're messy. He gets closer because your honesty is the key that unlocks intimacy. There's a story I'll never forget about a woman who came before Jesus and didn't have the words. She just had her tears, her brokenness, and her desperation. She didn't bring him a polished speech. She brought him her truth. And he honored that truth. You know why? Because truth is worship. When you start where you really are, not where you pretend to be, you're worshiping him with your authenticity. I had to learn the hard way that pretending in prayer doesn't protect me. It actually delays me. Every time I came to God pretending to be stronger than I was, I walked away still carrying the same weight. But the moment I came to him stripped of the act, saying, God, I don't even know what to say right now. I just need you to meet me here. Something shifted. It wasn't always instant, but it was real. I started feeling lighter because I wasn't carrying the burden alone anymore. So let me tell you this. Stop worrying about getting the words right. Stop rehearsing in your head before you pray. Just open your mouth and talk to him like you would if you were sitting across from the only person who could save you from drowning. Tell him you're scared. Tell him you're mad. Tell him you're confused. Tell him you don't feel worthy. And then just watch, because when you invite him into where you really are, he's going to take you somewhere you never imagined you could go. It's easy to talk to God when everything looks good on paper, when you're checking off your goals, when the people you love are smiling, when doors are opening and prayers are being answered in the way you pictured. Those prayers flow out smooth and they sound almost poetic because you're praying from a place of comfort. But I want to talk about the other kind of conversation, the one you have when life has knocked the wind out of you. when you're praying with a voice that's shaky, when the words don't come out polished because they're being pushed through pain. That's the prayer that shakes heaven. That's the prayer that carries weight. We've been trained to share our testimonies after the victory is visible, after the wound is healed, after the mess is cleaned up. But what about the prayers in the middle of the mess? What about the moment when you're still bleeding emotionally and you decide to open your mouth anyway? That's when the connection with God becomes raw and unfiltered, because when you speak from the wound, you're not praying for appearances, you're praying for survival. And there is a kind of honesty in survival mode prayer that's impossible to fake. Some of the most powerful moments you will ever have with God will happen when you're not trying to impress Him, but when you're barely holding yourself together, when the tears are falling faster than your words, when you feel that lump in your throat and you realize, if I keep talking, I'm going to break. And that breaking is exactly what He's been waiting for, not because He wants to see you hurt, but because when you finally break open, there's no barrier between you and Him anymore. You're not speaking through a mask. You're not decorating your pain to make it look acceptable. You're giving it to Him exactly as it is. The wound prayers sound different. They're not, Lord, thank you for this beautiful day kind of prayers. They're, God, I don't even know how to get out of bed today kind of prayers. They're not, I'm grateful for the lesson right away. They're, I don't understand why you let this happen prayers. And let me tell you something, God is not intimidated by those prayers. He's not shocked by your honesty. He's been sitting with you in that pain the whole time, waiting for you to turn to Him instead of running from Him. I've learned that when you speak from the wound, you give God the most authentic version of yourself. It's like handing Him a fragile, broken piece of your heart and saying, I don't know what to do with this anymore. Can you take it? And He will. He will take it. And instead of tossing it aside, He will start to restore it in ways you couldn't have imagined. The beautiful thing is that prayers from the wound don't just change your situation. They change you. Because in those moments, you're learning to trust Him in the dark. Anybody can trust God when the light is on and everything is visible. But real faith is trusting Him when you can't see 2 steps ahead. Real faith is when you pray even though you're not sure what the answer will be, even though you don't know when the pain will stop, even though you don't feel strong enough to keep going. I think sometimes we're afraid to pray from that place because we don't want to sound ungrateful, or we've been taught that it's a lack of faith to admit that we're hurting. But it's actually the opposite. It takes deep faith to say, God, I'm coming to you from a place of pain, and I still believe you care. I still believe you can handle this. I still believe you can turn this around. That is faith in its purest form. Faith that's not dressed up in convenience, but forged in fire. You may not realize it, but when you pray from the wound, your words are dripping with something that gets heaven's attention, your dependence. You are telling God, I can't do this without you. And that level of surrender will always draw His presence. It's not weakness. It's alignment. So maybe you're in a season right now where you don't have a pretty prayer. You don't have the strength to wrap your feelings in nice church language. Maybe all you have is, God, I need you. God, help me. God, please don't let me go through this alone. That's enough. In fact, that's more than enough, because those prayers don't have to be long. They just have to be real. And when you offer them, something shifts in the atmosphere, not because you're perfect, but because you're honest. Somewhere along the way, a lot of us picked up this idea that talking to God is supposed to sound a certain way. We think we have to string together the right words, quote the right verses, or sound like the people we've heard praying in church. We start performing without even realizing it, like we're auditioning for His approval. And because we're performing, We end up hiding the parts of us that don't sound holy enough, clean enough, or worthy enough. But here's the truth: God doesn't need your script. He's not impressed by how well you can imitate someone else's prayer. He's after your voice, your tone, your words, your heart. When you drop the script and just get real, you step into a level of intimacy with God that scripted words can't touch. Think about it. When you're talking to someone you love and trust, you don't rehearse before you speak. You don't memorize lines to make them think you're sincere. You just say what's on your mind and in your heart. That's what God wants from you. He wants you to come to him like you would if you were sitting on your best friend's couch after a long day, talking about what's weighing on you. I remember a time when I was so busy trying to sound right in prayer that I wasn't being honest. I'd say all the things I thought he wanted to hear, thanking him for blessings I could barely see, declaring my trust when I was secretly questioning him, reciting verses without letting them sink into my soul. And it wasn't that those words were bad. They just weren't real for me in that moment. I was giving him the polished version of my heart, not the actual condition of it. The turning point came when I realized that if I have to hide what I'm truly feeling, I'm not really talking to God. I'm talking to the version of him I've made up in my head, and that version isn't real. The real God already knows my thoughts before I speak them. He already knows my doubts, my fears, my disappointments. Hiding them doesn't protect me. It just builds a wall between us. So I started doing something different. I started praying like I was writing a journal entry he could read. I told him when I was confused. I told him when I was mad. I told him when I felt small and unqualified. And you know what happened? I started to feel his presence in a deeper way, not because my life suddenly got easier, but because I wasn't performing anymore. I was letting him into the messy, unedited, unfiltered version of me. The crazy thing is, when you start praying that way, it can feel awkward at first. You might catch yourself thinking, I can't say that to God. But why not? If he's really your father, if he's really the one who knit you together and called you by name, why would you think he can't handle your honesty? The truth is, he's not scared of your emotions. He's not put off by your frustration. He's not disappointed in your questions. He's the safest place to put them. Some of the most powerful breakthroughs happen when you give God the words you've been too afraid to say out loud. Because here's the thing. If you can't be honest with him, you'll never fully trust him. And if you don't fully trust him, you'll keep carrying burdens he's been waiting for you to give him. Dropping the script is not just about honesty. It's about surrender. You may have been taught that prayer has to be long, formal, and perfectly structured. But sometimes the most powerful prayer is, God, I'm tired. Or, God, I need you to show me what to do. Or even just, God, help. Short, raw, unedited prayers can carry more power than an hour-long performance because they're coming from a heart that's not pretending. When you strip away the formalities, something beautiful happens. You stop talking at God and start talking with him. You start to notice how he responds in the quiet moments. You start to hear his comfort in ways you missed before. And you realize that he's not looking for the perfect words. He's looking for the real you. We spend so much of our lives carrying things we were never meant to carry. Guilt that's been sitting on our shoulders for years. Shame that creeps in every time we think about our past. Fear of what people would say if they knew the whole story. And we get good at hiding it. We smile through it. We work around it. We bury it under business, success, and even church routines. But the truth is, those hidden pieces of our story are still weighing us down. They affect how we see ourselves, how we treat others, and how much of God's love we're willing to believe we deserve. The moment you start confessing those things to God, not just the safe sins, not just the mistakes that you can spin into a testimony, but the stuff you don't want anybody to know, that's the moment something starts to break off of you. Because confession is not about giving God information he doesn't already have. It's about opening a door for him to step into the places you've been keeping locked. He's not waiting to hear your confession so he can judge you. He's waiting so he can free you. When I first began truly confessing, I didn't even know how much I'd been holding back. I thought I was being honest with God, but there were certain things I kept quiet about, things I thought would make him see me differently. And it's crazy because deep down I knew he already knew. But there's a difference between God knowing something about you and you willingly handing it to him. When you confess, you're saying, I'm not going to hide this from you anymore. I trust you enough to take it. That's when the chains start to loosen. Confession has a way of clearing the fog. You might think it will make you feel worse, but it actually does the opposite. Because as long as you keep it inside, it festers, it grows heavier, it twists into shame, and shame isolates you, not just from people, but from God. But when you bring it into the light, shame loses its grip, and suddenly what felt like a prison starts to feel like a release. Some of us are carrying secrets that we think make us unworthy of God's attention. We're convinced that if we spoke them out loud, even in prayer, it would change how he sees us. But let me tell you, there's nothing you could confess that would make him love you less. There's nothing you could reveal that would shock him or make him regret calling you his own. He's seen it all. He's been there for all of it. And yet, his response is not to pull away. It's to draw closer. The enemy loves a hidden mess. He loves it when you convince yourself, I'll deal with this later, or I can handle this on my own. Because as long as it stays hidden, he can use it to whisper lies into your spirit. But the moment you open your mouth and hand it over to God, the power of those lies breaks and the truth comes rushing in. Not the truth about what you did, but the truth about who you are in him. Confession is also an act of humility. It's saying, I can't fix this without you. And humility positions you for help. You can't receive what you won't admit you need. But when you stand before God, even with all your mistakes laid bare, you are still standing in the safest place you will ever be. Because he doesn't take your confession and use it as a weapon against you. He uses it as the blueprint for your healing. And healing doesn't always happen in an instant. Sometimes confession is the first step in a long journey. But here's the thing. Once you've confessed, you're no longer walking in the dark. You've got the light of his grace shining on the very thing you thought would keep you away from him. That light changes everything. It gives you clarity about where you've been, and it starts to reveal where he's taking you. I know it's scary to say the words out loud, even in the privacy of prayer, but the cost of keeping it in is far greater than the cost of letting it go. You think you're protecting yourself by keeping quiet, but really, you're keeping yourself bound. We live in a world where silence feels uncomfortable. The moment things get quiet, we reach for our phones, turn on the TV, play some music, anything to fill the space. And sometimes we take that same habit into our time with God. We think prayer is supposed to be all talking, all asking, all thanking, all moving. We keep the words going because silence feels like nothing is happening. But what if I told you that some of the most life-changing moments in your relationship with God happen in the stillness? That sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. Silence is not the absence of prayer. It's a form of prayer. It's the moment you stop performing and just let him be with you. It's the pause that gives him room to speak. When you sit in silence before God, you're saying, I trust you enough to stop filling the air with my own noise. And in that quiet space, your spirit becomes more aware of his presence. The chaos inside you starts to settle. Your thoughts slow down enough for you to actually notice what he's been trying to tell you all along. I remember seasons when I would talk and talk in prayer, almost like I was afraid of running out of words. I thought if I stayed talking, I was keeping the connection alive. But looking back, I realized I was afraid of the quiet because I didn't know what might rise to the surface in that stillness. The silence has a way of pulling up things we've been avoiding. pain we haven't dealt with, decisions we've been putting off, truths we didn't want to face. But here's the beauty of it. That's exactly where God does his deepest work. In silence, you start hearing things differently. You notice the way your own heart is beating faster when certain thoughts come up. You recognize how much fear is wrapped around certain prayers you've been praying. You become aware of the tightness in your chest that you didn't even know you were carrying. And in that awareness, you give God something to touch, something to heal. Silence doesn't just help you hear God's voice. It helps you hear your own soul. Sometimes God answers you in a whisper, not because he wants to make it hard, but because he wants you to lean in. The more you slow down, the easier it is to catch the subtle ways he speaks. It may not be a booming voice. It might be a thought that brings peace, a memory that stirs gratitude, or an idea that feels like it was planted right in your spirit. It might just be the overwhelming sense that you are not alone, even if nothing else about your circumstances has changed. The enemy loves to keep us busy and distracted because a distracted heart rarely hears from God clearly. But when you make space for silence, you take away his advantage. You step into a place where you're not reacting to everything around you. You're listening for direction from the one who sees it all. And in that space, even if you don't get all the answers right away, you get something better. Peace. I know silence can feel strange at first. You might sit there thinking, okay, what now? You might even feel like you're wasting time, but you're not. Every second you choose to rest in his presence without forcing the moment is a second where you're reminding yourself that he's in control. And when you learn to be still with him, you carry that stillness into every other part of your life. You stop rushing into decisions. You stop letting anxiety run the show. You start moving at the pace of his voice, not the pressure of your surroundings. There have been times in my life when the silence gave me more direction than hours of talking ever could. Not because I figured everything out, but because I realized I didn't have to. Sometimes the answer you're looking for is not a yes or a no. It's the assurance that God is still here, still guiding you, still working in ways you can't see yet. So if your prayers have been feeling one-sided, if it feels like you've been talking and talking, but nothing is shifting, maybe it's time to stop talking. Maybe it's time to just sit in the presence of the one who already knows what you need before you say a word. When you talk to God in truth, something shifts. It might be something you feel right away, or it might be something that quietly starts to move beneath the surface. But one thing I've learned is that real prayer never leaves things the same. It either changes what's happening around you, or it changes what's happening inside of you. The challenge is we often expect God to work on our timeline. We pray, and then we check our lives like a tracking number waiting for instant delivery. And when we don't see the change fast enough, we start wondering if he even heard us. But the truth is, God's timing is not our timing. And if we're being honest, sometimes we don't even realize how much we need that delay. Sometimes the space between your prayer and your answer is the space where God is shaping you to handle what you've been asking for. If he gave it to you too soon, it might crush you instead of bless you. And so he works in the unseen, setting things in motion that you can't track, but you'll feel the impact when it's ready. There's something powerful about trusting God for movement while also trusting him for timing. It means you've decided not to let impatience rob you of your faith. You've decided to keep showing up in prayer, even when the evidence hasn't shown up yet. It's the kind of faith that says, I know you're working, even if I can't see it. I know something is shifting, even if my circumstances haven't changed. That's a different level of trust, because it's not based on what you see. It's based on who you know. I can think of times when I prayed for something and felt like God was silent, only to look back months or years later and realize that he had been answering me the whole time, just not in the way I expected. While I was waiting for him to open a door, he was strengthening me so that when the door opened, I wouldn't just step through. I'd be able to stand on the other side without falling apart. That's what his timing does. It prepares you as much as it provides for you. We live in a culture that doesn't like to wait for anything. We want same-day shipping, instant downloads, and quick results. But the kingdom doesn't work like that. In the kingdom, seeds have to be planted, roots have to grow deep, and seasons have to shift before the harvest comes. When you pray, you are planting a seed. And like any seed, it doesn't break through the surface the moment you put it in the ground. There's work happening in the dark before anything becomes visible. That's what's happening in your life right now. God is cultivating something beneath the surface. And if you give it time, it will grow into exactly what you need. The waiting isn't wasted. It's in the waiting that your character is tested, your faith is refined, and your perspective shifts. It's in the waiting that you learn to depend on him in ways you never would if everything came easy and fast. And when the answer finally comes, you don't just celebrate the outcome, you value the journey that prepared you for it. I know waiting can be hard. It can feel like you're stuck, like nothing's happening. Like your prayers are just bouncing off the ceiling. But I promise you, movement is happening even when you can't feel it. Sometimes the first thing God changes isn't your situation, it's your heart. He might calm your anxiety before he changes the circumstances causing it. He might teach you how to forgive before he brings reconciliation. He might show you how to let go before he puts the right thing in your hands. That's why you can't let the timing discourage you. If you've been praying with honesty, if you've been showing up in his presence, then something has already shifted. It might be small at first. It might be so subtle you don't notice it until one day you realize you're not reacting the same way you used to. You're not carrying the same heaviness. You're not living in the same fear. That's the movement you prayed for. It just started inside before it showed up outside. So don't stop talking to him just because the timeline doesn't match your expectation. Don't walk away from the process because it's slower than you hoped. The moment you spoke those honest words to God, you set something in motion in heaven. And when it's time, you'll see it unfold in a way that reminds you why you trusted him in the first place.